Welcome to the Mental Mastery Show, where your host, Max Wigan, interviews world-leading experts from sports, business, and psychology on what it takes to unleash your potential and master your mind. Let the show begin.
Welcome to episode 30 of Mental Mastery, where I interview the world's greatest minds on what it takes to live an epic life. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Amy Johnson, a psychologist and master life coach that has been a featured expert on the Steve Harvey Show and Oprah.com for work on helping people break free from addictions and unwanted habits. I'm a huge fan of her book, The Little Book of Big Change that I got right here, and super excited to talk today about the no-willpower approach to breaking bad habits. So Amy, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Max. I'm happy to be here.
Super excited for this. Now, Amy, we all know that change is hard, especially long-term change. In fact, the latest stats I saw said something that, when people set New Year's resolutions and goals, around 91% of those goals and New Year's resolutions actually end up failing. And so why is it that making lasting change, not just for a week or two, but actually for a long run is so hard?
Yeah, well, I think what you said about like short-term and long-term is so important to see, because we can make a lot of stuff happen in the short term, just by sheer discipline, willpower, thinking our way through it, determination, whatever all that is, right? Like we can do all kinds of things in the short term, and those are the kinds of change strategies, if you will, that we've been fed all over the place. Like those are attractive because they're fast and get this quickly. And, so everybody gets all excited about that. And they feel like we have some control in the matter. Like we're, on some level, I think all humans are out there looking for what do I do? Tell me what to do, and I'm going to make this happen. So those kinds of short-term change efforts, they give us a job, and they put us right in the thick of it, right in the middle of the equation. And we love that in some way because we can prove it and do it and all that. So that's great, except that, like you said, it's a totally different story when we're talking about deep, lasting kind of change. And what I think we're all doing for the most part is taking those short-term strategies and trying to apply them to big long-term things, and then it's not working, and then we get frustrated, and then we think, why, and what's wrong with me, and maybe I can't change, and we go around telling people change is hard and all of this stuff. And it's not that it's hard, even long-term deep change, it isn't hard, but it's that we're using the wrong tools. We're trying to make it happen with all of our effort.
Yeah, there's so many important points here, and I think the thing that really what it comes down to is making change with the brain in mind, right? So actually understanding how the brain operates, and it's not these short-term fixes and techniques oftentimes that, while it may be useful, oftentimes they just don't help, right, over long run. So just trying to push through your willpower, right, it may sound like a cool strategy, and it may sound cool to you, right? So I'm gonna toughen it out and everything. But over the long run, if you actually want to do something month after month and year after year, it might not be the best strategy. So why is it that people actually struggle so much with willpower, and why is this really broken approach to making long-term change?
Yeah, I think because, again, we've all used willpower many times, and it's helped us in the short term, and it looks like the thing to do, and it kind of just we just go to that because it's like the only thing we know, in a sense. There's so much talk about effort and discipline and plans and strategies and accountability and all of that stuff, and there's not a lot of talk out in the world about insight, or about, seeing life in a different way, or how, because it's just not as, I don't know why, but I think because it's just not as attractive. It's
it doesn't sound quite as sexy, right? It's I'm going to be so tough and hard, right?
Yeah, it's like I'm not in charge of that. That's just something that happens to me. So why would I pay attention to insight, or, and it feels and it's kind of mysterious. It's invisible, and it's, it's not something we can kind of wrap our head around as easily. So I think that's why the focus is there so much, but it's really cool to kind of just start to point in that bigger direction of long, deep transformation. The kind of change where people look back and say, the world doesn't even look the same to me. That kind of stuff is awesome.
Yeah.
And it isn't, it's different, you know, it isn't something we can control and all of that, but it is like, I think if we start to look in that direction, there's so much great stuff to see there.
100%. I think if you look at most people's oftentimes the transformation, right? When does it happen? After, like, you get diagnosed with a certain disease, right? After like a loved one dies, after we get in these moments that just force us to see the world differently, right? And oftentimes it's not because like all of a sudden you have superhuman willpower, right? And like everything's perfect. It's because people look at life in a different way. And I think that's really important point here that you're making, is that it's these insights, right? Which may not sound as cool and as sexy maybe as like, oh, I'm gonna toughen it out. But it's really these ways of like actually long-term changing how we see the world that actually influences change, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
totally. Totally. And that can, you know, I mean, it's super fascinating. It's just not as familiar to us. So it's easy to kind of gloss over it, you know, but we don't have to wait until we hit a rock bottom or until someone gets a diagnosis or any of those things you mentioned. You know, those, they break us open to seeing life in a new way. But that's the great thing, is like, we don't have to wait for that big news or that hard thing to happen. We can start to get curious about how life works anytime.
Yeah, that's really your big message, right? Is you don't have to wait to get insights. You can actually start really, like you said, looking in the right direction and then finding those insights for yourself and really looking inward, right? And like just understanding your own true nature. So can you share a little bit more about, how we can really begin to look at life and look at ourselves a little bit differently? That's going to change our perspective on life.
Yeah, I mean, I love starting people off with this like what if question, you know, like what if change is simple? What if it's effortless? Like what if we're always changing in big and little ways all the time? Like we're designed to change. We are not static creatures. There's
Yeah.
nothing solid and stable about us. We are like, I mean, change is so our nature. And it's funny because that's kind of a cliche that people know. Like people will say that, right? Like the only thing that you can count on is change, or whatever the saying is, you know. Um, so we kind of know that on some level, and then at the same time we go around and say change is hard and I'll
Yeah.
never change. So, you know, but looking toward that, like what if change and coming back to our health, coming back to just falling back into a mind and a body and everything that just knows how to work, that works as the best it ever can. Like, what if all that is happening already and we've just been looking away from it? We've been so caught up in, here's what I wish wasn't happening, and here's what I want to happen, and here are the steps I'm going to take, that it's like we're just looking over here and we're totally blind to how good it already is and
Yeah.
what's already been happening. So I love that as just kind of a starting point for people. Like, what if you were totally wrong about all the things we've been doing, with no judgment, but just like a curious, open, like, whoa, what would that mean?
Yeah, I love it, especially this question, like, what if it was easy, right? Because even
Yeah.
me, I realized, like when you asked the question, I was like, I had this immediate sort of gut reaction. It was like, it has to be hard, right? But like, it's supposed to be hard, but it's not, right? But it's like we all kind of have the story in our heads, right? They're like, changes in some way hard because we failed so many times and we've struggled so many times by just trying to go through effort. But the way that you conceptualize change is actually something completely different, right? Rather based on insight and based on simply a different understanding of really how the world operates, right? And so I think that's this distinction for me really so important, to just understand it. Like, hey, first of all, change can be easy, right? Just sort of having this open mind for the fact that, hey, it is, there is a different way, right? There is an easier way if we just use the right steps and the right, sort of techniques, right?
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah. I think so much of that is starting with, you know, kind of this idea that people call it different things, innate health, or, you know, whatever they call it. But really, to me, I mean, just in a very practical way, it's like seeing that we come equipped with with so much that just kind of runs itself. And so much, everything in the way our mind works and our body works and our spirit works and all of that, so much in how life works and nature works, is all kind of I don't want to say self-running, but it's run by this bigger energy. Like, we don't need to manage it, right? And that when we get caught up in things, so disease or habits or anxiety or depression, any of that, when we find ourselves in these places, it's just a place where we've just innocently kind of stepped in the way. So we look at that and we think, oh, this is a problem, and now I need to step in and fix it. Like nature has gone wrong, God or mind or whatever you like has gone wrong, or I've messed up and I find myself with this habit or addiction. Now I need to step in and change that and fix it. And it just makes things worse. So seeing that, no, nothing's ever gone wrong. Everything works perfectly fine, but we get caught up in our heads and think we're running the show. And then we find ourselves in issues sometimes, but to kind of see, no, it's about helping us kind of just step back and let nature restore itself, let everything kind of bounce back to its healthy default nature. And that sounds so simple, and people can be like, yeah, I get it. My body knows how to heal itself and all that stuff. But really, I just see that as so huge. And like the main reason usually that people are caught up in something is they don't see that if they let go, things are going to start to right themselves. They think problem, push harder, do more, and then they end up more in it.
Yeah, that is such an important point. And like you say, I mean, the sort of natural state of human beings is this sense of happiness and joy and peace of mind, right? And it's like when you're walking through the street, right? There's no reason in that moment to be unhappy or to be sad or frustrated, right? Because there's nothing external destroying us in that moment. It's just like where our own minds are spinning, right? It's like arguing with reality, like you said before, wishing that things were differently, wishing that this would happen or that would happen, or that person didn't say this or that person didn't do this. But like our mind inherently isn't that, right? It's like when we sort of get in our own way, that's when we experience that, right? And I love what you just said about, we're actually strengthening that, right? By thinking about it, right? Because even if you think about it, like from sort of a neurological perspective, like when people keep diving into their problems, right? And all they think about is their problems, right? And all they think about is the things going wrong. What happens is you actually deepen that in your mind, right? And that's what I find really fascinating, is that you actually deepen those problems by focusing on them, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And if you don't know that what your mind is spitting out and talking about and what you're focused on is just a mind having a conversation with itself. You know what I mean? Like if you don't know that, and most people don't, like if you don't realize that that's not truth being narrated to you, that it's just a mind talking to itself, regurgitating the same old stories over and over, and then of course you're going to pay more attention and you're going to get caught up in it and you're going to think there's a real problem here. But as soon as people start to see, oh, that's just what a mind does, like a mind just, it'll like kind of create a problem and then try to solve it and create, like, I think it's just kind of wants to have a job. Like it just wants something to do.
Just wants to keep itself busy, yeah.
Yeah. So it creates a problem. Then it tells you what a big failure you are for having this problem. Then it comes up with a game plan that we're going to get really serious about to fix the problem. And it's all the same little creature doing all of that, which is kind of funny if you think about it. I mean, it's all that one mind. It plays every single role in that. And for us to kind of step back and say, oh, I see how this is happening. It's like a hamster on a wheel in there. It's this one little character's playing all the roles. Like maybe I'm the one noticing this, maybe there's something to see in that. And I just think that's gigantic. That's a huge, huge way that we start to naturally, without having to do anything, we naturally get out of our own way, because we just see what's going on. And why would you get in the middle of that?
100%, right? Because like I think that's really the beginning of this insight, right? Is that the thoughts that come out of your head, right? That like your brain is kind of like spouting at you all day long. They're not necessarily the truth, right? Yeah. Like there's so much drama we create in our own heads, but it's like it's so far away from reality. But why do you think people take things like so personally, right? Like we have the thought and we're like, well, this is my thought, then it must be true, right? It must be me, right? Why do you think people take it so personally?
I think it's just the nature of the design, I think it's like that stuff comes to life with such reality in our own heads. And like you said, we are in the center of the whole story. So, it's like if it's a thought about somebody else, it doesn't affect us so much, or a thought about something, like we might think about politics or, some family we don't know or something like that. Like, you might think about it. People don't get obsessed about stuff like that. We get really caught up in everything. It has to have something to do with us. So I think that's why,
me always in the
it's
center of the
like,
universe, right?
yes, like we are the center of our own little mental universe, and it's just gets sticky. And then and it talks about our life, and it brings in things we remember. So it looks really true, like, oh, this did happen to you and you did fail here. And, like it brings and it's hard to argue with that stuff. It tells very good stories. So I think it's just that perfect storm for us getting so caught up in what's happening up there. But again, there's another way to see that. And that's the huge, like, what if, like, yes, because people will argue all day long, like, oh, but it's like all the things I was saying, oh, but it's true. And that did happen. And this is the kind of person I am. Like, there's so much you can argue with to kind of bolster that story, but to kind of set that aside and say, okay, but what if, let's look at it from another angle. What if it really is just a machine basically in there saying the same stuff over and over, different day, same story, maybe slightly different details, but the themes are all the same. You're in the middle of all of it. The more you're in the middle of it, the more it affects you, right? The more you pay attention because it seems more important and more real. Like when you start to see, oh, there's a mechanism going on here. Like there's something we can see. And by the way, who's the one noticing all that? If that's all just the truth, like how are we even able to sit here and have a conversation about it? And we call it. And there's so many clues in our language and just how we see things that, oh no, this is its own little thing. But if you never think to look there, if no one ever points you there, you're gonna miss it. So it's so cool to start to see that. And once you start to see, oh no, it's its own little thing running around creating all that. And, or what if it's its own little thing running around creating all that? Like, it's amazing what starts to just the layers that start peeling away and the insights people start having, and then change that's when people are like, oh my gosh, you're right. This change stuff isn't so hard because I saw that my own mind was telling me I needed this thing. And then it was mad at me for doing this thing. And then, like you see that pattern and it's like, oh, that's crazy. And,
right.
feel freer from it.
Yeah. One of the metaphors they've used before in your book was you're sort of the driver of the car and your thoughts, your urges are just this passenger sitting next to you, screaming at you to do this and to do that. Right. And I thought that was such a good way of really like visualizing that. Right. And I think it's not just one passenger, right? It's more like 20 passengers on like a big full bus, constantly screaming at the driver, hey, think this, think that, like believe that, right? But at the end of the day, like you're still in control, right? You're still in control of what you actually think and do. So my question was basically if, people do all these things to just get back to normal, they just want to feel good, right? That's why we eat that chocolate cookie. That's why we watch that movie. That's why we say these bad things to our friend, because we just at a basic level want to, get ourselves to feel better again. So if those obviously aren't very useful strategies, what else can people do to get back to normal, to get back to feeling blissful and happy without engaging in those negative habits?
I mean, the thing is, like, again, I think the more we see how we work in that design, that's always moving us back toward our natural well-being. I mean, that was huge for me when I first kind of started to glimpse that, like, oh my gosh, there is actually an energy at play. Like there's actually, life actually moves through us such that it's clearing the decks all the time. So we can feel and think and do anything. And then it's like hitting the little refresh on your browser. Everything kind of goes away and then comes back again fresh. And to see that we work in that way, like our mind, we can feel all kinds of stuff, but is just complete peace and well-being and happiness and everything we're looking for. I think really coming to insightfully see that, and we just do that by exploring this, it just takes that edge off. Again, it starts to just not make that much sense to jump in and hurry up and distract from a feeling, because one, the feelings, we see those in a new way. They're just fluctuations of energy moving through us. They aren't like our habit, our addiction, our failure, our weakness, and that's sure how they look. Thing about me, automatically our feelings start to become a little more manageable and just easier to be in, so there is already a much, a lesser kind of desire to like hurry up and add something to make that feeling go away. And then when you also, like I said, start to see, and no matter what we're feeling anyway, it can't take away from who and what is there. And the more we just kind of hang out in this flow of life, the quicker we bounce back to who we really are. All of that just begins to chip away. And it's not a logical thing, although it is interesting when we start to see just the logic in it. Like when you hear people say things like, well, why would I do that? Like, why would I go drink, half a bottle or whatever, when I know I'm just going to feel horrible afterward, when the reason I'm drinking to begin with is to not feel this feeling. Like, who cares? Why would I do that? So it's like,
logically it doesn't make any sense, right?
Yeah, and it's not that we changed because of the logic. It's more that we had some insight that deeply just changed how things look, and then our logical mind is like, oh, duh, why didn't I see that 5 years ago? So the logic pops out of the woodwork at us once we've kind of had this deeper shift.
Yeah, for sure. And there's really two main things I want to touch on here, which is, first of all, the way you sort of mentioned that there's this distinction between you and your thoughts and your urges and your addictions, right? So you are not your addictions. You're not your bad habits. You're not your negative emotions, right? And I think that's really where you have to start, is you have to sort of distinguish yourself and disconnect yourself from that thing that's going on in your mind, so that you don't feel as a failure, right? You don't feel like, oh, I'm the person, I'm the thing messing up, right? But it's really this negative talk spinning in my head. And the second thing I found really interesting, I mean, really at the end of the day, it seems to go down to mindfulness, right? To just, noticing when we go down the rabbit hole, noticing when we think those negative thoughts or experiencing those negative emotions, and then being able to sort of take a look or step back and really, openly look at our life and like, does this make sense right now? Like, do I actually want to engage in this, or is there a better way? Would that be correct from your opinion?
Yeah, and I think that's right. I mean, I think we find ourselves